Walk into any supermarket from Tokyo to Toronto, and you will see it. A bright, neon orange bottle that promises fun, youth, and tropical refreshment. Fanta is the second largest brand in the Coca-Cola Company's massive portfolio. It is consumed more than 130 million times every single day. It is the taste of summer vacations and childhood parties. But the history of this drink is not bright, and it is certainly not colorful. If you peel back the label and travel back 80 years, the orange hue disappears, replaced by a murky beige liquid brewed in the darkest corner of the 20th century. The story of Fanta does not begin in an American boardroom or a chemistry lab in Atlanta. It begins in the heart of the Third Reich. It is a story born from the scarcity of World War II, created by a corporation desperate to keep its factories running while the world burned around them. While American GIs were storming the beaches of Normandy with bottles of Coca-Cola in their hands, the German soldiers on the other side of the line were drinking a beverage invented by the same company. This drink was adapted specifically to survive the Nazi regime. How did the world's most iconic American brand navigate the rise of Hitler? How do you invent a soft drink when you have no sugar, no flavoring, and no fruit? And most importantly, what happened to the men who made the deal? To understand how Fanta came to be, we must first understand the global dominance of Coca-Cola before the first shots of the war were fired. In the 1920s and 30s, Coca-Cola was not just an American drink, it was becoming a global symbol of modernization. Nowhere was this modernization more aggressively pursued than in Germany. By the time Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933, Coca-Cola GmbH, the German subsidiary, was thriving. Under the leadership of an American expatriate named Ray Powers, sales had skyrocketed from a few thousand cases to over 100,000 a year. But it was the man who took over later, a German national named Max Keith, who would become the central figure in this drama. Max Keith was a towering, imposing figure with a small mustache and an obsession with the Coca-Cola brand. He was not a member of the Nazi Party, but he was a pragmatist who understood that to do business in the new Germany, one had to play by the regime's rules. The 1936 Berlin Olympics were a turning point, where the company marketed heavily to the German youth, while banners waved alongside swastikas. By 1939, Coca-Cola GmbH had 43 bottling plants and more than 600 local distributors. But then, the tanks rolled into Poland, Britain and France declared war, and the Atlantic Ocean became a hunting ground for U-boats. The outbreak of war in Europe in 1939 made business difficult, but Max Keith continued to operate. Everything changed on December 7, 1941, when the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the war. The Trading with the Enemy Act was invoked, severing all communications between the Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta and the subsidiary in Essen. For Max Keith, this was a catastrophe, as the entire existence of Coca-Cola relied on a single, top-secret ingredient, merchandise 7X. With the embargo in place, the supply line was dead, and the remaining stocks of 7X syrup in Germany were dwindling rapidly. Keith faced a terrifying reality. Without the syrup, he couldn't make Coca-Cola. If he couldn't make Coca-Cola, his factories would be seized by the Nazi government, and his machinery melted down for munitions. Keith had to make a choice. Let the company die, or invent something entirely new to keep the machines running. Max Keith gathered his top chemists and laid out the problem of creating a new beverage under strict rationing. Sugar was scarce, citrus fruits were impossible to import, and flavorings were non-existent. They had to look at what was left, the industrial leftovers of other food processes. What they found was unappetizing, consisting primarily of whey and apple fiber. Whey is the yellowish, slightly sour liquid remaining after milk has been curdled and strained, often used as pig feed. The second ingredient was apple fiber, specifically the pomace or mashed up skins and cores left over from cider presses. Keith's chemists took these industrial scraps and tried to turn them into a soda, sweetening it with beet sugar or saccharin. The result was a beige, cloudy liquid that tasted somewhat like ginger ale, somewhat like cider, and somewhat like nothing else on earth. But it needed a name, and legend has it that during a brainstorming session, Keith told his team to use their imagination. In German, their Fantasie. One salesman, Joe Nip, immediately shouted back, "Fanta!" and the name stuck. Max Keith now had a product, and he used his connections to position Fanta as an essential food product. Because sugar was so heavily rationed, German housewives began buying Fanta to cook with, using it as a sweetener for soups and stews. Keith walked a razor's edge, collaborating with the functionality of the state to keep his trucks running and ads in publication. While millions suffered and died in the camps, the bottling plants kept humming, offering a strange comfort in a collapsing world. As the Allied forces closed in on Germany in 1945, production finally halted, only when there were no more bottles. When American troops arrived, Keith approached them not to flee, but to report that the subsidiary was still alive and the profits were waiting. An investigation concluded that Keith had technically done nothing illegal and had successfully protected the company's interests. Coca-Cola eventually discontinued the terrible tasting wartime recipe, but kept the valuable trademark. In 1955, the company in Italy revived the name Fanta, this time using real oranges to create the drink we know today. The dark, beige liquid of the 1940s was erased, but the lineage remains as a testament to corporate survival. It forces us to ask a haunting question. In the machinery of global capitalism, is there any regime too dark to do business with as long as the supply chain holds?